Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back. Crimson Desert just received a new hotfix, and this update is basically one of those updates that is all about smoothing out the rough edges rather than adding a bunch of new stuff. The biggest thing here is that the team went after a handful of issues that were interrupting play in pretty annoying ways. One of the more obvious fixes is the crash that could happen when riding a bear, which sounds funny until it happens to you in the middle of a run. They also fixed the problem where characters could render incorrectly on consoles and on AMD-based systems, which is the sort of issue that can make the whole game feel off, even if everything else is working fine. On top of that, Unka not following Cliff during certain main quest cutscenes has been cleaned up, so the story flow should be a lot less awkward now. There are also a few progression fixes in this patch that matter more than they might seem at first glance. Rewards for certain challenges were not being handed out properly, and that kind of bug is the worst because you do the job, finish the task, and then the game just does not pay you back. The Hohemark Ruins issue has also been addressed, since players were running into a blocker where the area could not be liberated at all. That is the sort of thing that can make a session feel dead in the water. So getting it corrected is a big deal for people pushing through the world content. Another fix that stands out is the feed bin problem on the ranch. Before this update, the amount of feed was not decreasing even when livestock were eating nearby, which is exactly the kind of system bug that can make you second guess whether the game is tracking things properly. It is not the biggest cinematic issue in the patch, but it is one of those everyday gameplay problems that quietly gets under your skin. The update also improves frame rate drops in certain environments, so there is a bit of performance polish in here too, and that usually matters more than people expect once you are actually in a busy area and the game starts dragging. Now, even with these fixes, the studio is still flagging a separate set of known issues, and a couple of them are worth keeping in mind. On AMD, the game can still crash on driver version 26.6.2 or higher, including the 26.6.3 hotfix, and the suggested workaround is to use 26.6.1 or earlier, or wait for 26.6.4 and later. There is also a control issue where if a pet jumps onto the bed while you are interacting with it, the character can stop responding, and they say unsummoning the pet can temporarily solve that one. Fishing has its own bug too, with some fish unable to move after being caught in certain areas. The list keeps going in a way that shows the game is still ironing out a lot of edge cases. Greymane faction quests cannot be progressed while playing as Damian or Unka. The evasion control setting can still behave like the default key is active even after you change it, and Damian can lose access to shield-related skills if she dies right after using shield toss. There is also an issue where NPCs needed for quest progression cannot ride together on legendary animal mounts, which sounds like a very specific problem until you remember how many systems this game is trying to juggle at once. A few platform-specific problems are still on the board as well. On Mac, the cursor position can drift from the actual furniture placement point at certain resolutions, and the colorblind filter is not applying to the UI the way it should when colorblind mode is enabled. On PlayStation, the screen may freeze if you enter characters too quickly on the virtual keyboard while naming a pet or horse, so the advice is to type slowly with pauses. There are also graphics issues tied to NVIDIA GTX 1060 cards when FSR upscaling and frame generation are turned on, plus a separate FSR4 problem where rainy environments can lose the rain effect or start looking blurry and distorted. So overall, this update feels like a cleanup pass aimed at crashes, quest blockers, visual glitches, and a few performance headaches. It is not trying to reinvent anything, but it does attack a lot of the stuff that can ruin a good play session, and that is usually the kind of patch people appreciate the most once they're actually back in the game. Between the bear crash, the rendering fixes, the quest progress problems, and the frame rate improvements, this is one of those updates that should make the whole experience feel a little more polished.